Hello YouTube, welcome to KT Replicas. My name's Caden, and this is my attempt at a Sith Trooper helmet. These models were 3D printed with paid files that I will link in the description below. I think this helmet came out really good, fits my head pretty well, looks amazing. I think this red color really rocks. In this video, you're going to see all of my trials and tribulations with this helmet and learn from my mistakes as I did in real time. So yeah, let's get right into it. Alrighty, so this is the helmet that I started with. This is fresh off the printer. I PLA welded the parts together, and here you can see some of the seams that I'm going to be dealing with extensively in this video. A little bit of foreshadowing there because I had a lot of trouble filling these seams and making them look seamless. But yeah, right now I think what I'm going to start with is sanding this raw print, trying to get some of these really aggressive print lines down, and then from there we are going to see what we can do. So I'm using 150 grit right now to start with, just kind of trying to get these crazy rough lines that I'm seeing and feeling down before using my first layer of filler primer. Alrighty, so this is where we're at after that first round of sanding. Nothing too crazy, but it did help get these big print lines on top down to a manageable size. I also went over some of these seams here where the pieces were glued together, or not glued, they were PLA welded, but you know what I mean. But this is where I noticed that these little valleys and crevices were kind of going to be a problem. They were pretty gummed up with supports and stuff like that from the print. So what I'm going to be doing next is trying to get those little support structures from the printing process cleaned out of those little valleys. Now I think this is where reality really sets in for me, because these little valleys and crevices are going to be the death of me on this helmet. And these little tools that I'm showing you here are going to be the only thing that I have to combat against them. But after a pretty short process of picking out some of these crevices that I definitely didn't forget to record, this thing is going to get its first can of filler primer. I'm just using Rust-Oleum's filler primer. You can find it at your local Walmart. It's cheap, relatively easy to work with, and it does its job at filling the print lines. As always, don't forget to wear your respirator. I am very bad about wearing my PPE, but it is something that I do need to get better at. Alrighty, so after a few layers of filler primer, we're going to be moving on to our next big step, and that's filling the lines the filler primer cannot fill. For that, we're going to be using the next big player in the prop building industry, and that is Bondo glazing and spot putty. Bondo is a toothpaste-esque consistency. It's really good for filling in those really nasty print lines and weird areas that your filler primer just can't really get rid of, but it is not good for my issue at the top of my helmet, which I will be using JB Weld for. This seam is just wide enough that I think the Bondo just doesn't adhere well. I think it kind of just like falls through the big valley that I have on the top of this helmet, so I opted for JB Weld to kind of seal that gap, and then I put Bondo over the top to try to make that connection, seamless all around that top of the dome. But of course I will be sanding over that to try to make that look even better. So as you can see here, I have put a layer of Bondo over all of the seam lines and pretty gross looking print lines and deformations. And now we're going to be using 150 grit sandpaper again to go over this Bondo and try to make that surface a lot smoother. Now, This process of filling and sanding and repeating and repeating and repeating is definitely the most tedious part of this process, but in the long run, it is the most rewarding. Doing this the right way, right now, saves you a lot of stress and a lot of work down the line, and that's something that I realized as I kinda didn't spend enough time on this process. Now, here you can see that I transitioned to using a mouse sander. This was a big help in this process because I ended up having to come back and sand this thing multiple times. And this is the final product of my helmet after a full day of sanding and filling. Now, at the start of day 2 is when I started to realize that these valleys and crevices along the back of this helmet were going to kick my behind, as well as these big seams from where I had to cut the helmet in my slicer. But I ravaged my dad's tool shed and I found some file sets and stuff like that. So my idea was to go after these valleys with a file and some sandpaper. Now, these little crevices and stuff like that were extremely tedious to deal with. I ended up spending the entire rest of the day trying to get these crevices dug out, cleaned out, and throughout the process just kind of sanding around the area and stuff like that. But these things were tough. I mean, I went after them for hours using multiple different files and multiple different picks and all that kind of stuff. Another lifesaver that I had stored in my house were these microfiber cloths. The garage that I work in, just the garage at my house, is extremely dusty, and I mean, so is everything around this area. So these microfiber cloths came in super clutch whenever I was trying to get all that dust and any of the other shavings and stuff like that off of the helmet before doing another coat of filler primer. And speaking of, here's that next coat of filler primer. Now, the idea when I started this second coat was that I was going to spray this and then I was going to up the grit to 320 or 600 or something like that. But I quickly realized that I was not even close after spraying this coat on. This is what it looked like after that coat of filler primer, and this was the big uh-oh moment because I saw these seams and they just looked horrid. I honestly have no idea what I thought I saw or what I was even thinking whenever I decided to do another coat of filler primer with the objective of sanding with a higher grit next. Because, I mean, these things just looked rough, and it was not what I liked. In fact, I got so upset at the look of the helmet after that next coat of filler primer that I actually stopped recording, and I think I spent 2 or 3 days staying up super late, just grinding on this helmet, trying to get this thing looking even relatively smooth, but that's kind of where I messed up because I got impatient and I tried to cut corners and I tried to get to the paint job rather than doing the helmet right. I chose this red gloss Rust-Oleum rattle can. It was a cheap option, it was the right color, but I quickly realized after that I don't think it looked the way that I wanted it to. And this was a combination of the fact that I think the thickness of the paint and the heavy layers that I was probably spraying on this helmet did not mix well with the crevices. It had a lot of pooling and looked pretty nasty, but the biggest thing is that this gloss red really just exposed the weaknesses of my sanding job. And it's when I realized that I had to just go back and restart. And that is exactly what I ended up doing. I spent the next 4 days just hammering this helmet and trying to get it to my desired smoothness. I was up till 2, 3 in the morning, multiple days in a row, just trying to get this thing to look the way that I wanted it to. Now, because of the fact that I didn't record what I'd been doing for the past few nights, just because I wanted to focus on getting the work done, a brief rundown was just that I was sanding with 150 and then filling areas that I felt needed more, and then sanding with 150 and then repeating that process until I finally reached an area where I was like, you know what, I think this looks okay. And then I decided to up the grit to 320, and that's where I'm currently at now. But it was a big pain sanding in those valleys. I cannot stress that enough. That was the hardest part. But I think I had finally achieved the look that I was going for, and I definitely spent time on this helmet. Now, here you're going to notice that I am just doing a base coat of black. That is because I want to get everything in a uniform color, just kind of a vision coat. I don't really know what else to call it, because I will be doing a 600 grit wet sand for my final sand before trying to get some color on. I think I've reached a point in sanding and filling and all that kind of stuff to where I kind of like where it's at. I don't have any visible seams anymore. And these little valleys and cracks and crevices and all that stuff are not totally gunked up with filler primer and paint. So I did a very light coat of black primer yesterday as a base for the airbrush paints that I will be doing. And I have wet sanding stuff set out now, so I'm going to lightly wet sand this to my desired smoothness, because there's like a little bit of roughness from the rattle can. And then tomorrow my airbrush paints get here, and we're going to take a different route with painting and go airbrush, because I feel like the airbrushing will do a lot better in these little valleys here. It won't get clogged up if I'm smart and take my time, which I've learned a lot about myself with this hobby, and it's that I don't take my time often. So yeah, I'm gloved up. I'm double gloved on this one. I had a bit of an oopsie today with a blade, and I cut my thumb open, but that is besides the point. Let's get this started. Now, I know I've dissed on the sanding and filling process a lot, but wet sanding this was the biggest relief because of all of the challenges I'd been facing with this helmet, and it finally gave me a feeling that I was going to get somewhere with this. And then it was also great to just kind of feel how smooth this thing got. Definitely very encouraging. It is almost entirely, well, yeah, that's the right way to say that. Almost entirely smooth. I swear it feels way better than it looks. It looks rancid right now. which worried me for a little bit there because I was like, what if I'm like actually just making this so much worse? I didn't realize this was in the way. I didn't want to touch it with my bare paint and whatever covered oils. I don't even know. But yeah, I think I mean, it's as smooth as I've gotten it. The only areas I did not hit were here, here, and here, and here, because they're gonna have pieces glued over the top. So I'm just gonna post-process the pieces separately, glue them over the top, and I think it's good to have roughness where the glue is supposed to be. It helps with adhesion. So yeah, I think this turned out really well. Again, it looks horrid. I mean, look at all the different colors I've got. I got 2 shades of reddish orange and gray and black, and yeah, even green on the bottom from one of the first prints. So yeah, it looks really bad, but again, it feels amazing. It feels ultra smooth. I know it's not ultra smooth because I only did 600, but this is the smoothest this thing has ever felt. So I'm going to let this sit for the rest of the night in front of the fan, which I just realized you probably can't hear me because this thing's extremely loud. But yeah, I'm gonna let it sit and dry, and then hopefully tomorrow that paint gets here and I will use my airbrush. So yeah, we will see. Thank you, past me, for that quick rundown. Here are some shots of what the helmet looks like at the end of that day. Today's the big day. I will be, for real this time, painting the helmet red. I definitely rushed it the first time, and now I actually do admit that, but excuse me. Yeah, so I will be using this Vallejo Game Air Blood Red. I got multiple of them because it's a big helmet. And my airbrush in the back over there, which I have used a few times and I've had good results from it. So yeah, I'm really excited to finally get this thing in its true color for real this time. Yeah, let's get into it. Even though this was definitely the right pick, it was definitely the long pick, and just like everything else in this project was testing my patience a little bit, because I was forcing myself not to pull that trigger back all the way so that there was not some buildup in the crevices on this helmet, because that's the whole reason I switched to an airbrush, so that there would be no buildup, because I have trigger control. So I actually have to have trigger discipline. But as you can see, I used so much paint out of that other airbrush that I ended up having to switch to my backup here, but I did get the job done. And these are the results of the airbrush paint. Now, one thing I didn't even think about when I bought it was that it sprays matte, so I had to run and grab some emergency clear coat. I accidentally forgot to press record whenever I propped my phone up for this, but I did end up hand painting the black details. I really didn't feel like masking, but I realized whenever I got up to go eat dinner that I never pressed the record button, and it was just sitting there for no reason. So yay me, but here's the black details. After that section of black on the face, we can finally get to the last part of the painting process, which is clear coating all of our stuff with a gloss clear coat. I'm pretty glad that I looked up beforehand what clear coat I should use, since this is the first time I've clear coated my airbrush paints, but I found out that you cannot just use Rust-Oleum's gloss clear coat on acrylic base paints, so I ended up switching to Krylon. And this is what it finally looks like shiny. This is the moment I was waiting for. I think it looks great. we are finally in the home stretch. This is the part where I glue on the faceplates. I did the faceplates off camera because they printed really well. I ended up just doing like 2 layers of filler primer, sanded it, and then ended up painting it while I was painting the other helmet. I will be using Gorilla Glue gel and then frog tape whenever I eventually go grab it and come back with it now, just to hold that faceplate up in place, so there's not any shifting while the glue dries, because that would be tragic. This is one of my favorite parts about doing a helmet, and that's doing the visor. I think it wraps the helmet up super nicely. It's a great way to end the project. I use a Hobart face shield replacement. You can order them on Amazon. I think they're like $10. They're a very affordable way to get a good looking visor, and they are see-through. You can actually see. A lot of visors cannot see. I will be using some duct tape to hold it in, and then a little bit later I put some Gorilla Tape on a little bit of the areas on the inside because the duct tape doesn't hold up well in the Texas humidity. Now, last but not least, I put some EVA foam padding on the inside of this helmet to make it feel less like a bucket and more like a futuristic sci-fi Star Wars helmet. I just bought some random foam off of Amazon, got a pair of scissors, some E6000 and Gorilla Glue, and put it in around the contact points of the helmet. And this is what the helmet looked like with the padding and the visor in. And here we have it. This is the finished product of my Sith Trooper helmet. Definitely the most beautiful helmet I have done to date, but boy did I have to work for it. I think it turned out great in the long run, but man, I put so many hours into this thing, and I am really happy with the results that I got. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you sticking around and listening to my journey with this crazy helmet. Here are some glamour shots I took, and I hope you have a great day. Till next time.